Hi, thanks for joining a new video. Today, I have a complete review of the HUAWEI Nova 13 Pro. Let's begin. This is an upper mid-range or premium mid-range device from HUAWEI. It's interesting to note that there can be differences from the version distributed in China, so pay special attention to the global editions. In this case, the launch price in Mexico is 12,999 pesos, approximately $630 though. Keep in mind that the prices here differ from those over there. It's important to note that in Mexico only the 12GB RAM version is available, paired with 512GB of storage. These aspects are some of its key strengths. Moreover, when this video was recorded, you would receive Huawei FreeBuds 5 as a bonus, which makes for a great addition. Additionally, they offer a surprise gift and Huawei Care for a duration of 3 months, providing protection against any accidental screen damage. In this segment, there are several devices that could directly compete with this one. So, how about joining me to explore point by point what Huawei plans to offer us? Let's begin by examining the front of the device. Here we will notice the reduced bezels and a capsule cutout for the camera area. I believe the design appears modern and the capsule cutout is justified since it includes 2 front cameras. Here we notice curved edges on all 4 screen areas, giving it a premium look. However, there's no Gorilla Glass or Kunlun glass protection from Huawei. The brand claims it uses aluminum silicate glass, which is quite durable with materials like lithium, silicon and aluminum, making it tough against. It's somewhat more challenging to observe how it falls, but I am not ready to attempt it just yet. On the right side, we can locate the power button along with the volume buttons. This is set within a frame that appears to have a metallic look, but in reality, it seems to be made of plastic. The absence of metal frames might possibly be a disadvantage compared to some competitors. At the top we can find the microphone and the grill for the secondary speaker, while on the left side there is absolutely no port. However, it helps us to notice how thick the device is. It's 782mm, making it relatively thin. At the bottom there's a tray for 2 nano SIM cards, plus a microphone, USB-C port and the main speaker grill. The back cover is stylish as expected from the Nova series. They've named it Dynamic Plaid Texture Design. It reminds me of a uniform or tablecloth fabric, which looks interesting. In this particular instance, I have the green edition with me, however. It is also offered in both white and black. Interestingly, the white edition features a back cover quite similar to that of the green edition. The main distinction lies in the black version, which boasts a completely smooth cover both visually and to the touch. This contrasts with the green and white editions, which have a cover that appears textured to the eye, yet remains entirely smooth when touched. The camera module also features a significant relief that extends outward from the body of the device. Personally, the design hasn't completely won me over, but that's just a matter of individual preference. Additionally, it's worth mentioning at the design level that the camera's outline is adorned with the word Nova, which might seem like a simple touch, but it actually adds a much more premium feel to the device. It also has a fully polished edge that reflects quite a lot, enhancing the overall aesthetic, the illumination. However, in this particular case, a downside of this device is that it does not include IP68. In this price range, it is becoming the standard, so you need to be cautious to avoid accidentally dropping it in water. The screen measures 676 inches diagonally and is of very high quality, featuring a 2K resolution. That is 2776 by 1224 pixels, ensuring that all the details will appear very sharp, even the smallest text, as it achieves a density 448 pixels per inch. The level of detail is definitely very high. However, in this case it can adjust its resolution, displaying a lower resolution at times to conserve power. You can always set it to the highest resolution in the settings if you prefer. The screen technology is OLED, which means it will offer us extremely intense contrasts, vibrant colors and high brightness. In this case, through the configuration options, we will have the ability to select between 2 different color calibrations, whether you prefer less or more saturated colors. Honestly though, the difference is not that significant. I notice more of a difference in color temperature. In the normal setting, I observe colors to be slightly warmer, and in the vivid setting, the colors appear cooler. However, I don't perceive a significant change in the intensity of the colors. It even offers manual color temperature adjustment, but it lacks any natural hue sensor or similar feature. This screen features LTPO technology, ranging from 1 to 120 Hz. I believe this offers a similar experience to flagship devices. For static content, it lowers the refresh rate to save battery, and for fast movements, it can reach 120 Hz. It's a quality screen with fluidity, and the touch response is 300 Hz when gaming, so it might help. The maximum brightness peaks at 400 nits, good for outdoor viewing, especially with HDR content. This confirms its HDR compatibility, where parts of the screen light up more, useful for movies or series. It also auto-recognizes scenes to enhance photodynamic range, and videos that have not necessarily been recorded or captured in HDR format. Therefore, it offers excellent features regarding this aspect. Additionally, the low brightness level is comfortable enough to avoid dazzling you excessively during nighttime. It even boasts a dimming rate of 2160 Hz, which reduces the flicker generated by the screen at low brightness levels. In this particular phone, the flicker is not so noticeable, or it may even be practically imperceptible. The only significant absence worth mentioning is the additional attenuation option, which is missing from the accessibility settings. However, it's otherwise a high-quality display featuring other technologies, such as a dual-sensor adaptive dimmer for automatic brightness adjustment, ensuring a very positive visual experience. Regarding the sound, we discovered both positive and negative aspects. On the positive side, it offers stereo sound. However, the speaker, from the top, I didn't like it. It has two audio outputs, one through the earpiece for calls and the other through the frame. However, the sound is mainly perceived in the mid-frequencies, and interestingly, neither high frequencies nor bass frequencies are noticeable. This results in a feeling of rather poor sound quality in this area. Fortunately, the bottom speaker complements it very well, so the overall sound experience is positive. But yes, I would really like to have access to an equalizer for slightly reduce the mid-frequencies that become quite prominent in the complementary speaker. Unfortunately, there's no equalizer available for the speakers. Let's listen to a brief test, however. Keep in mind, it's not the same as hearing it live.
En este caso tampoco encontraremos Dolby Atmos.
In this case, we will not find Dolby Atmos either, but it does have the Huawei head sound effects, but these are only available when you use headphones. In fact, there is also a 10-band equalizer available, but only when using headphones. And speaking of headphones, remember that it has no jack, so if you want zero latency, you need USB-C adapter, or if your priority is to listen to music in high definition, fortunately it does have support for the LDAC codec and also for its own codec from Huawei known as LHC. Therefore, if you're using FreeBuds or headphones from another brand equipped with the LDAC codec, you can enjoy high-resolution audio, provided you have a subscription to a service offering that level of music quality. Regarding the microphones, it has only two, so let's listen to a test.
Esta es una prueba de audio grabada con los micrófonos integrados de HUAWEI Nova 13 Pro.
As you might have noticed, I believe it is quite standard. The quality doesn't seem particularly good or bad. However, let's now test it in a much more complex scenario concerning the amount of noise. As you realize, in this particular case, it might lose a bit of definition, but it doesn't really saturate. It seems to adjust its gain, although sometimes the changes take a little longer. Nevertheless, I believe the audio recording quality is quite positive. Finally, in this section, the vibration motor operates on the Z-axis. This can be quite bothersome because it's a device that aims to provide a much more premium experience. However, having a vibration motor of this style, in my opinion, is actually a good thing. It does not quite achieve it, although it must be noted that among the vibration motors on the Z-axis, this could potentially possess one of decent quality. We will particularly notice it on the keyboard, where the vibration is designed to be as brief as possible, attempting to somewhat mimic an X-axis motor. Nevertheless, you will observe in numerous other parts of the system that it is merely a basic vibration motor. One of its notable weaknesses: this device features two front cameras, with the main one being 21 mm, and we are discussing. The camera features a 60 megapixel sensor, and while the aperture is f2.4, it indeed includes autofocus. Additionally, there is a 52mm telephoto camera equipped with an 8 megapixel sensor, f2.2 aperture and autofocus. This dual front camera setup is relatively uncommon in the market, which could become a significant advantage. Nonetheless, I believe that despite the main camera offering an excellent range and a high-resolution sensor, the f2.4 aperture is quite narrow for a front-facing camera. A cell phone camera can cause you quite a lot of trouble when you're dealing with a scene that isn't well lit. However, I appreciate the broad theme, and it's interesting to see a telephoto camera used in selfie mode. This is likely aimed at individuals who want to capture details of their face, or perhaps beauty bloggers who wish to share very specific details. They can achieve this as both cameras are equipped with autofocus. In this particular case, the device doesn't have a quick shortcut to enter the camera immediately. When the device is unlocked, you have the option to press the volume button down 2 times if the screen is off, and that allows you to access the camera quickly. However, I truly believe that a dedicated shortcut is necessary for even faster access. Additionally, having a shortcut for capturing photos using this palm gesture mode or something similar would be beneficial. Since we're only going 2, we could use smiles for capture as an assistant, or here we might find sound control by saying cheese or speaking loudly, though it seems less practical. We could press the volume buttons or activate the floating button for a more comfortable capture where your finger can easily reach, but I think the gesture is necessary. One thing I personally find quite annoying is that it automatically switches to portrait mode whenever we use the front camera, even though we might not want to use portrait mode at all. This means you have to be extra careful to check if the blur effect is activated or not. Take a look at the incredible range this camera offers us. It's simply amazing. As I mentioned earlier, it also allows for capturing very close details of your face, and this is definitely one of its most impressive features. We will also discover the beauty mode settings. It's important to note that in this instance, it includes several presets. Alternatively, you can select the custom setting if you wish to adjust each face parameter individually. At the top, there's also a button where we can select some filters. However, these filters cannot be previewed in real time. Additionally, access to the timer is somewhat concealed within the settings menu. Therefore, I believe that the camera interface requires a bit more refinement in order to ease of use. Currently, it appears to me that it is not particularly practical. In this instance, note that the capture speed will be standard. I wouldn't describe it as a leading capture, but I don't perceive it as one of the most agile captures either. The front camera is of excellent quality. However, in certain special situations, the color can be slightly paler than I would prefer. Despite this, the level of detail is exceptionally high. Of course, it doesn't always capture at 60 megapixels, but only when you specifically ask it to. However, I appreciate that it can function as both a wide-angle camera and a close-up camera. And thanks to its autofocus feature, almost all the time your face will appear with excellent detail. Therefore, the only downside I notice with this camera is the color management, which isn't always consistent. There are moments when the color appears slightly off. But just to provide you with a better understanding of the complete range that this amazing dual camera system can offer when used together, take a look at the vastness of this scene. Then observe the incredible level of detail we can capture, such as the individual eyelashes, for instance. It's absolutely remarkable. In indoor scenarios, it's important to note that we still enjoy an excellent range. In this case, it manages noise exceptionally well, which is typically very pronounced in these types of situations where there isn't as much light available as there is outdoors. This capability is truly impressive. However, it's important to note that in this particular case, the result remains quite positive. In scenes that are backlit, you'll see that the preview is clearly not optimized well, but take a look at how after processing. It performs exceptionally well. In this instance, it's a cloudy day with substantial lighting in the clouds, making it quite a complex scene. Honestly, the result that this device achieves is remarkably good, as it preserves all the texture of the clouds and also maintains the full level of detail in the area of. Is definitely a very good level of camera, no doubt about it. And at night, take note that even though it has a very good level of amplitude, it does not suffer too much. The face still maintains a good level of detail. And however, you can see a slightly artificial effect in some areas. Additionally, we will notice the same effect in other areas of the photograph where it attempts to eliminate noise. Yet there are areas with a lot of grain and other areas that are completely clean, which gives you a somewhat strange feeling about the final result. If you move in too close to see these details, it's clear there's room for improvement, but from a distance the picture appears fine. In a backlit night scene, things become more complex, and here you can tell the camera's quality is slightly lower due to its closed aperture, which is the trade-off for capturing such wide shots. For night portrait photography, it's important to remember that if you use the screen as a lighting support for the face, the result can be quite unattractive in terms of color. This is especially true if you're in an environment with warm lighting, because the screen provides a very cold illumination. This combination is definitely not pleasing. However, if you choose not to use this additional assist light, I believe the result remains of good quality. In this situation, the bokeh effect looks quite nice, however, the level of detail is reduced due to the darkness of the environment we were in. Interestingly, it results in a somewhat cleaner photograph compared to traditional photography. Yet when it comes to portrait photography during the day, we notice it struggles to maintain focus on objects, indicating an area for improvement. Additionally, the colors might become less vibrant in scenarios with more intense hues, which is another aspect to consider. Interestingly, it gives us the ability to take portrait photos by applying zoom. In this context, it manages to keep objects in focus. However, the image quality is quite poor. You can notice there are areas that are completely overexposed and burned out, and the color has been altered in a very intense manner. So, I wouldn't really recommend taking portrait photos with this setting. Now, on the back, we are going to find, to start with, a 16mm ultra-wide camera with an f aperture. The sensor is 8 megapixels and it comes equipped with autofocus, so it also features macro capabilities with a 2 megapixel distance. Next, we have the 27mm main camera with a variable aperture from f1.9 to f4, which is significant as is typically found in high-end devices. The sensor is 50 megapixels and is a HUAWEI sensor, providing excellent light capture along with autofocus and optical stabilization. And lastly, we discovered an 81mm telephoto camera. It has an aperture of f2.4, complete with autofocus, and the sensor is 12 megapixels. Additionally, it features RGB and optical stabilization. This seems to me to be a truly outstanding camera system given its capabilities. The presence of variable aperture and RGB sensors is quite surprising, as these are features that Huawei typically reserve for their more expensive devices. However, in this instance, it only integrates a high-resolution sensor, so in that aspect it still stands out. You would definitely notice the difference between the mid-range and the fully premium range. Pay attention to how it will automatically activate an MO mode when we are close to a small object. This feature is quite beneficial, and indeed you have the option to turn it off by pressing the button located in the bottom left corner if you prefer not to use it. Also notice now that we are going to experience a considerably good capture speed. In this regard, it becomes quite prominent, although even after this the photographs are still not very good. Are going to be processed, so you will need to wait a little longer before seeing the final result. However, the experience is still good in terms of speed. In fact, the device somehow attempts to predict when you will press the button. It's interesting to note that in several attempts where we tried to capture the number 3, the result actually appeared a fraction of a second earlier. Therefore, you shouldn't worry too much about pressing at the exact moment, because I believe, which helps recover the device somewhat. Additionally, it provides a burst of up to 100 photos. It takes around half a second to initiate, yet I believe there's minimal space between each photo. This allows you to capture the precise moment. By tapping on the screen, you can adjust the exposure or focus. However, it still lacks Huawei's XMash technology, their highly advanced image engine found in high-end models. Nonetheless, we will have access to it in the future. There are some color filters, as I have shown you before. If you're looking for a more advanced setting, you can switch to the professional mode. In this mode, we have control over the type of metering and the ISO, which on the main camera can reach up to 4,09,600 thanks to the RGB sensor. Additionally, you have aperture control when using the main camera. As I mentioned, it has a variable aperture ranging from f1.4 to f4.2, and those with more photography expertise could really take advantage of this feature. A primary difference will be the light input, although you might not notice as much of a change in depth of field compared to what you might observe with larger lenses. Additionally, we find shutter speed adjustments that can go up to 30 seconds, along with exposure compensation, focus adjustments, and white balance settings. It's important to note that it does support RAW photography. When it comes to scanning documents, we need to enter a special mode called Documents mode, which notes that the device will attempt to. It possesses the capability to automatically detect the edges. However, be aware that it doesn't permit adding pages, nor does it include a color optimizer, making it a basic scanner. Regarding QR codes, it's important to note that while in the main camera, no action will occur automatically. You must press the button located in the lower right corner of the viewfinder to access AI Lens, and only then is the scanning action executed. This makes the process somewhat slow. In outdoor photography, the ultra-wide camera appears to have a very impressive quality, particularly because it lacks severe distortions or noticeable chromatic aberration around the edges, which we often notice in other devices within this price range that feature ultra-wide cameras. Furthermore, the color reproduction is quite appealing. In fact, the color from the main camera seems to be a bit less accurate. displaying slightly more reddish tones. And however, overall, the photography captured with the main camera is still of good quality. I definitely say that. This is a really good device, primarily due to the impressive level of detail it manages to achieve. This makes it a device capable of taking really good pictures. Now, if you take a look at this, you'll see the result when using zoom at 2/10. This involves a crop on the sensor. Notice that it maintains optical quality, especially in certain areas where you can see a good level of detail. However, at the same time, there are other areas that appear completely out of focus. So you might need to keep the device as stable as possible to achieve a better result. In general, it seems to apply cropping on the sensor while still maintaining good quality in intermediate zoom pictures. Now, as we move on to the telephoto camera, we can note that once again we see very good quality in the level of detail, especially in this still short range zoom. If there's anything we could reproach, it might be that it doesn't maintain the same color rendition across all zoom settings. However, I think such a demand would be more appropriate for much more expensive devices. In this particular case, considering it's a mid-range device, I believe the photo quality is truly remarkable at this short-range zoom. Now let's move on to the 5x digital zoom. Once again, note that it appears to apply some cropping on the sensor and some optimization. Although it doesn't seem to maintain a full 100% optical quality, I still think you can see natural photography without excessive sharpening, and it offers good color and nice contrast. But once again, let's take a closer look at this zoom range starting from the ultra-wide camera. We move through the main camera, then the 2x zoom which crops into the sensor. Next, we have the 3x telephoto zoom camera, and then the 5x zoom. From this point, I believe you begin to notice too much that we're dealing with digital zoom. It's quite excellent at short-range zoom, yet when it comes to medium-range zoom, I think it really falls quite short. Please note the low level of detail observed. We can see an exaggerated and artificial over-sharpening effect that leads to poor image quality. The maximum zoom capability is 30 times, but I must stress that it won't be very useful. Generally, I would suggest the maximum zoom that maintains decent resolution is around 5 times, although this is something that could potentially be improved with a future update. As of now, note that this is the main camera. If we desire a wider view, we have the option to use the ultra-wide camera. In wide, I was already telling you that it has a good quality, and if we want a little more amplitude, we could use the panoramic mode. But I must tell you that it is a rather simple panoramic mode. I would even say bad because it has little level of detail and little dynamic range, so it is not advisable to use the panoramic mode. In interior photography, we see a good quality with the ultra-wide camera, although we start to notice some artifacts that are generated, I guess, at the time of treating the image with the ultra-wide camera. To eliminate the noise and at the edges, we observe significantly less definition. In these low light conditions, the main camera will be the perfect choice. In these situations, you will notice that it keeps a good contrast, a good level of detail. And overall, it is a decent photograph. With the Zoom 2x crop, we continue to see good quality, though not quite as much detail as we observed outdoors. Using the Zoom 3x camera, we observe a good outcome. However, once more, the color doesn't match consistently with the earlier results. Yet overall, we could definitely say that the photograph is quite good. Now with the Zoom 5x, we will notice that there's not as much detail as seen in daylight, but it still retains good color quality. In situations with backlighting, it's worth noting that the ultra-wide camera performs well, even though it doesn't appear as optimized in the preview once the processing is complete. It does a good job, although the chromatic aberration is a little more noticeable, and we can see that it is not a high-quality camera, unlike the main camera, where we see a much better result in terms of balance of lights and shadows, and we do not perceive as much chromatic aberration as if we saw it in the ultra-wide camera. With the 2x zoom setting, we see the same behavior as we saw with the main camera, which is positive, but note that in this case with the 3x camera, the coloration is much better. Was very bad. It's not something that always happens, but could be this kind of circumstances where the color doesn't help too much and the result will be greatly affected. Although talking specifically about the balance of lights and shadows, it does a good job, but the color pretty much ruined this photograph. I insist, it's not something that always happens, so hopefully they will correct it with an update. At night, this would be the performance we found with the ultra-wide camera. I find it remarkable considering it's the ultra-wide camera. Even in the darkest areas, the photograph is clean, with some graininess but not excessive noise. The well-lit areas don't have this issue, except light sources may appear burned. For the price, it's a good photograph. The main camera has enhancements in every aspect. Not only does it capture colors that are more natural and true to life, especially under warm lighting, but it also ensures the light source isn't overly bright and washed out. The darker areas maintain clarity without excessive noise, providing well-defined and excellent night photography. When using the night mode, it becomes evident that it increases the warmth of the photograph, making it even more true to reality, though it hasn't seen any additional improvements too much in other aspects. With the telephoto camera, you definitely notice that it remains somewhat of a weaker device in this regard. Utilizing the night mode boosts the contrast and color saturation slightly, yet it still doesn't produce such a spectacular photograph at night. Additionally, note that if there are no light sources in your frame, the ultra-wide camera could become significantly affected in the darker areas. It tends to appear a bit too tinted pink with numerous artifacts, and it's definitely not pretty at all. The main camera performs a significantly better job in this aspect, although it is not entirely free from this graininess that might be produced in the darker areas. However, the result is much more useful and improved. Utilizing the night mode makes a significant improvement, enhancing the contrast and emphasizing the areas of greater darkness much more. Although, I must insist that some strange artifacts can still be observed here, so for those who are the most perfectionists in photography, I believe this is important to note. That won't completely satisfy you. However, it is a pretty good photo. If you attempt to zoom in on these darker areas, you will notice that it only employs digital zoom rather than utilizing the telephoto camera. With the main camera, the photography improves drastically, primarily due to the variable aperture. In this scenario, it can open up to f1.4, allowing a substantial amount of light to enter. This helps ensure that the darker areas still retain enough information that is free of noise. Though it still can't handle 100% perfectly in the brightest areas, I think it does a great job. Night photography with the main camera is ideal for macro shots. Remember, you can use the ultra-wide camera to get close to small objects. Even with some zoom, you can achieve a result like this. It might appear slightly artificial, but this is as close as you can get with the main camera. Of course, it's a bit artificial, but this is about as close as you can get with the main camera. In any case, it appears to be a photograph with excellent detail. It strikes me that even though it has an automatic variable aperture, it doesn't close the aperture enough in these macro scenes, which would be beneficial. It seems the automatic aperture control isn't optimal here. For instance, this photograph taken in automatic mode almost always uses a certain f-stop, and in this scenario, we can see that the focus is quite precise and specific at a certain distance. If an object is just a bit farther away, it will appear out of focus. In this scenario, it creates an effect similar to spotting on some edges. This device, however, possesses more advanced capabilities, but these need to be adjusted manually. Observe, for instance, how the result shifts by adjusting the aperture to f, utilizing the capabilities of this cell phone. The focus becomes somewhat more uniform in these areas, therefore I would prefer the aperture to have improved management from. The primary camera in this particular example encountered certain issues with focusing. It was noted that it struggled to focus on the foreground elements, yet it managed to focus more effectively on the background. This device comes with a high-resolution mode, which is designed to provide an exceptionally high level of detail in situations like these. I believe that if you learn to fully utilize the data from its sensor, it will be beneficial. This is unlike other devices that, despite having high-resolution modes, do not present something as advanced. Actually, it also features a high-resolution mode enhanced with artificial intelligence. However, I must admit that it seems to have less resolution compared to what we observed with the previous mode. When it comes to motion scenes, you can definitely notice that the ultra-wide camera performs quite well. In this example, the main camera encounters some issues with focusing. It struggled to focus on the foreground and instead ended up focusing on elements that were more in the background, which was not ideal. With the 2x zoom setting, we observed that it did manage to focus correctly in this test. Even with the 3x camera, which is often a bit tricky in moving environments, we saw a result that was good enough. Regarding portrait photography, it's important to note that with the main camera, we're going to see a relatively good result. However, if you zoom in, you're going to notice very large inconsistencies. For instance, here, it blurred some areas of the hair, and in this part of the hollows, you can see that it has the performance isn't very high. By applying a bit of zoom, you'll notice a significant improvement in performance, especially around the hair and the person's edges. The result is quite appealing, even though there are still minor inaccuracies in areas with tiny gaps. However, I believe we would expect that from high-end devices. In fact, if you utilize the telephoto camera, you'll achieve the most pleasing results in all retirement photography. Observe the bokeh effect that beautifully concludes in the background section. It is quite impressive, and even in the hair area, which is typically very challenging, this device handles it exceptionally well. Therefore, using the telephoto lens for portrait photography stands out as one of its most significant strengths. When it comes to video recording, there are several positive aspects to highlight. We have compatibility with 4K resolution at 30 frames per second across all cameras, which is quite advantageous. Even the front cameras are capable of recording in this quality, and if you want to achieve 60 frames per second, you will need to reduce the resolution to Full HD. However, this option is available for both the front camera, the main camera, and the telephoto camera. The ultra-wide camera, on the other hand, definitely has much more limited capabilities. Of course, within this price range, there might be some that already record in 4K at 60 frames per second, but they are quite rare. In fact, It's a positive aspect that this device does allow us to record in 4K at 60 frames per second. Interact among all these cameras within this setting. Notice that in the video recording interface, we will find a rather convenient ring to move in zoom between the cameras. We will also have the option to apply some color filters, but keep in mind that the resolution drops to Full HD, making it incompatible with 4K. We can change the resolution by tapping once on this top left corner, although that might become somewhat tedious or complex to be. By pressing several times, you can access the full settings menu. This way you have the ability to change the settings much more easily. When you are recording video, you should know that you will have the option to take pictures and also rotate to the front camera. This is something that typically only Samsung and Huawei allow. Therefore, it's a feature that can definitely be highlighted, because you don't need to stop your recording in order to interact with the same clip or show the rear camera again. It's a very convenient feature, and take note that it additionally includes the flashlight control directly accessible on the interface. Moreover, there's a button available to pause and resume the recording. Therefore, I believe it encompasses everything we could desire regarding control interaction. Furthermore, it's worth noting that even in professional mode, we have the ability to switch to a video mode. So, while recording video, we can modify some other manual settings. The video recording appears to be of very good quality to me. As an interesting fact, it keeps the watermark, unlike most cell phones that only apply it to photos. The image quality is indeed impressive. Note that the colors look vibrant and there don't seem to be any sudden changes in the white balance while recording outdoors. Additionally, there don't seem to be any issues or complications with the focus or anything similar, so I truly believe the recording meets expectations. Furthermore, it has exceptionally good level of detail. The ultra-wide-angle camera also has the ability to record video in 4K, but does not look as detailed as that of the main camera, possibly because of the quality of the lens or sensor. Also here, yes, you get to perceive at times the focus a little shaky, so it is quite noticeable when you switch to the main camera applying zoom 2x. Unlike photography, we do not see that it maintains optical quality. So it is clear that it is digital zoom, but the advantage is that it can. When you increase it to 3 times, you regain optical quality and it appears quite impressive. The camera's image quality is commendable. So the only minor issue seems to be with the ultra-wide camera during video recording. However, the telephoto camera genuinely resembles 4K quality. Please be aware that switching between the cameras might occasionally feel a bit slow. For instance, observe how indoors the ultra-wide camera reveals that it lacks some quality, appearing as if, which features minimal detail and low contrast. When you switch to the main camera, you'll notice that the contrast and detail level increase, although you might have observed that the transition appears slightly rough. Now pay attention to how switching to the telephoto camera also causes the transition to look a bit unsteady, yet the color saturation remains consistent. However, it still retains a significant amount of noise. Therefore, in situations with intermediate lighting, it's advisable to record solely with the main camera if you're aiming to achieve the highest image quality possible. In scenarios where there is backlighting, it is important to note that the ultra-wide camera may begin to have some difficulty with focusing. In these situations, it tends to prioritize making sure that faces are well lit, which can result in overexposing areas in the background that are more illuminated. However, the focus issue is what concerns me the most. When using the main camera, we will encounter a weakness in its ability to balance highlights and shadows. Consequently, it often ends up overexposing them and burning out many of the brighter areas. With the zoom camera, we notice a solid performance, although during the exchange, there was quite a bit of noise in the shadow areas. However, after that, it stabilizes a bit better and manages to balance the lights and shadows quite well. Interestingly, the telephoto camera performed better in these types of scenarios. During the evenings, we confirmed that the ultra-wide camera is the weakest when it comes to video recording, noting that if you use the telephoto camera, it will appear as excessive noise. It eliminates the noise and grain that might be generated, but it also removes a lot of detail. Even in the darkest areas, you will notice this result is quite strange, so using the ultra-wide camera in night scenes is not recommended. When we switch to the main camera, you will observe that it is not very appealing either, despite having a variable aperture, which seems a bit unusual. In the realm of photography, it had delivered spectacularly, yet when it comes to video recording, it appears to demonstrate that it is still not as powerful, likely because of processor limitations. We can observe that if there is any light source within the frame, the shadow area will be excessively dark, while the highlight area will have too much light. Additionally, using the telephoto camera results in what seems like excessive noise. Night recording is definitely a weakness in this device's design. As for stabilization with the ultra-wide camera, you'll notice fewer aggressive movements when walking and even while running. It balances movements quite well. The main camera seems even better in stabilization. When walking, the smooth balancing movements give it an elegant appearance. Stabilization, although if you start to run, if you are going to perceive much more. I think that if you are running, the right thing to do would be to record with the ultra-wide angle camera and with the telephoto camera. Stabilization is also smooth, although obviously the more zoom you have, the more difficult the stabilization will be. But I think it does a good job. In this case, I was walking and the result is positive. But since we are talking about zoom, see how it behaves in this case. The quality we had already seen up to the telephoto camera, but in this case the maximum zoom is 10x. However, in this scenario, the chromatic aberration is a little more accentuated and may suffer more than necessary. As for focus stabilization in well-lit environments, I think there will not be too much of a problem, although we had already seen that the ultra-wide camera can suffer a little more than necessary. But if we are in well-lit situations, we should not have so many problems. Interestingly, this particular device includes a portrait recording mode, but it's relatively simple. In fact, you can see a focused outline around the person's body, which gives it a very odd appearance. The level of detail is quite low and the color saturation seems a bit off as well. It is definitely not recommended to record using this mode. Take note that the intensity of the blur does not change, regardless of whether the person is close or far away, and it will also not be able to keep objects in focus. Then it is certainly a recording that is overly simple and lacks good quality. When it comes to the slow motion, we will discover two different settings available. Although both are in HD, the resolution for the slow motion does seem to be lacking. It can be in HD at 120 frames per second, or it can be increased up to 480 frames per second. However, you will observe an excessive number of interpolated frames, therefore the slow motion quality truly isn't up to par. The fast camera doesn't seem to be of very good quality to me. The basic speed setting is 15x, which is likely too fast for capturing people's movements. It also operates at a low bit rate, so when you pause the video, you'll notice a low resolution despite it supposedly being in 4K. Additionally, it lacks stabilization, making it not ideal for recording people's movements. However, if it's completely stable on a base, you can achieve up to an 800x, which means you would be able to record landscape movements quite nicely. However, the level of detail appears inferior, resembling a full HD video rather than a 4K video. Therefore, neither the slow motion nor the fast motion features have really appealed to me. The front camera is going to perform exceptionally well when you're recording outdoors with consistent lighting conditions. What I love most is the wide angle this camera offers. Unlike other devices, you don't have to stretch your arm to get a good frame. You can zoom digitally for a closer shot, but I wouldn't recommend it due to detail loss. Switch to the second front camera for better detail. I'm not sure about the color, but remember, you can show close-up details of your face if needed. This might be useful for beauty bloggers. Also, even with the ultra-wide camera, you have autofocus, allowing you to zoom in on objects for your audience. It's a great camera provided you're filming in excellent lighting, because in environments with a lot of... If you need to use the second zoom camera, it takes a few seconds for the color to adjust. After that, the color gets better, but it's still not enough to showcase the recording quality. Fortunately, the stabilization is good, so you can walk smoothly and get a decent result. However, I must emphasize that in areas with lights and shadows, it tends to prioritize illuminating your face, which might overexpose or completely burn out the brightest areas. Therefore, it's not highly recommended for such scenes. In indoor scenarios, you'll notice a lot of noise and grain. It's crucial to be in a well-lit environment for good results, otherwise the quality appears poor. Interestingly, when switching to the second zoom camera, it takes a few seconds for the color to adjust. After that, the color improves, but it's still not enough to enhance the recording's quality. And at night this is confirmed. Take note of the tremendous amount of noise and grain that appears all around. That's why I strongly insist that you need to be in a very well-lit environment. In those environments, the quality of the camera is indeed really very good. However, it strikes me how dramatically it drops as the light decreases. You will even notice that the coloration can jump a bit more aggressively. Therefore, I would not recommend using this device much for recording. Notice that it can also light up your face with the screen to enhance light gathering, but it's a rather cold light. So, if you're in a warm setting, the result looks odd and unnatural. Additionally, the device offers slow motion on the front, though with basic quality and fast motion, but with the same settings as the rear camera. This means we won't have anything particularly remarkable. Let's talk about software. In this case, we find HUAWEI 14.2 as the operating system. Remember that Huawei still in this version is still based on Android. We do not know a little of their future plans because in China they are already using Harmony Next, which is an operating system completely separate from Android. However, globally we still see these features. So it is a bit of uncertainty. In fact, it does not have some clear policy of updates, but let me tell you some of the functionalities. For instance, on the main screen, we will encounter some icons with a small line at the bottom. This indicates that we can slide upwards to explore additional options or shortcuts, which could become a useful theme for customizing your device. Additionally, we will find various themes that are set by default. Some of these themes are even interactive, working together with your lock screen, and you will notice a smooth transition. In the always on cover with the lock screen and later with the unlock screen, we offer excellent themes to customize your device by default. You can even add some of your own photos, and through artificial intelligence, it will detect the edges to apply additional effects on the background. Alternatively, you can set these magazine-style themes that will also include a transition between the always-on display, the lock screen, and the unlock screen, and after that, the unlock screen appears. It's important to note that we can also access a theme store, which, in this particular instance, has received an update. Obviously, through this theme store, we will have the ability to download even more content, should you find it interesting. Within the store, we will discover a variety of paid themes along with some other free ones which customize various aspects of the system. In fact, these themes are organized into different categories, and you can take your time exploring each one individually. As I anticipated, it also includes the always-on display feature, which will present you with some information even when your device is locked. Note that by default, this information is displayed when you tap on the screen. In this particular instance, it shows a dim background along with the clock. A bit more information in this situation, as you can see, does not allow us to directly change the background from this section. Instead, it will synchronize with the lock screen background, so you'll need to change the background from their section so you can apply it immediately. And this way, it will be configured. Regarding the always-on display mode, if you prefer not to have a background covering the entire screen, we can switch it to an image or perhaps a digital or analog clock face, or even some phrases that can stay visible in this section. It's important to note that in this situation, the option with the dimmed background is only available if you choose press to display. If you wish for it to be shown all day long, unfortunately that won't be possible. In order to display the time all day long, you will need to select one of these digital clock faces. This way, the screen will remain on continuously. Additionally, you will notice that there is an option available to change the covers if you desire your lock screen to have a constantly different appearance. We will also find the option to choose whether or not we want an application drawer on the main screen. Furthermore, we will find the senior mode, which will alter the interface to make it. Everything appears much larger depending on your preferences, and you also have the option to adjust the duration of the long press or the long press itself. Additionally, we will discover the one-handed use mode, which is activated by performing this gesture. In this instance, it is perfectly tailored to access everything, although resizing is not possible. However, I believe it is quite useful. Nonetheless, the gesture for activation might occasionally be a bit uncomfortable. And we also discovered several shortcuts. For instance, using the power button, you can activate the voice assistant. You don't need to hold it down while speaking, it's merely an activation gesture. Additionally, we identified a method to quickly open the camera using the volume button. There's also the classic knuckle gesture to capture a full screenshot or drawing with the knuckle for a partial capture. Moreover, you can even slide 3 fingers to take screenshots too, which offers gestures that are quite useful. Additionally, you can tap twice with 2 knuckles to start screen recording with ease. And finally, you have the option to lift the device to activate the screen or even double tap on it, though this might slightly drain your battery. You also have the ability to flip the phone face down when a call comes in to reduce the sound, or to answer it without touching the screen simply by bringing the phone to your ear. Note it also has a dock in the sidebar for running apps in floating mode. It allows one app at a time, but Instagram and YouTube are supported, unlike some devices. We can open the full list to run other apps in floating mode, so it can indeed be useful, even though it is somewhat limited in terms of the number of simultaneous applications that we are able to run. It is important to note that we will also have the capability to open apps in a split-screen view if we drag from this sidebar, and these apps will stay directly linked in the recent apps list. Moreover, we have the ability to change and adjust the spacing as needed. In fact, we could also click on this small bar that appears, which allows us to change the position of these applications. And if we combine it with the floating application view, we could potentially have up to a maximum of 3 applications open simultaneously. These floating applications can be minimized by simply dragging them to the side, or they can be closed. Remember that Super Hub is also available, which serves as a clipboard shared with your other devices. Although it does not offer immediate synchronization, you need to first click on these types of images and then transfer them. However, Here you can collect images to use later. See how we send an image to WhatsApp by dragging it. There's a simple mode that enlarges the main screen. There's also a bike mode with a different interface for motorcycles, where the interface is more limited to prevent any sort of distractions whatsoever. Among the additional applications, we have the Intelligent Control Center, which enables us to select and control our TVs directly from here, or even some other types of devices that support infrared control. Interestingly, it also includes a compass, which is not available in all devices. And something that appears to be even more intriguing is the Petal Clips tool, which is a completely free editor from Huawei without watermark. From here, you can adjust your videos, change speed, add effects. It's not the most advanced editor, but it offers many options and it's all free, no subscription. Finally, in the gallery, there's an editor with an eraser, but it's not generative AI. For example, we can try painting something. And the recognition isn't going to be as intelligent as you might have noticed, plus the feel is going to be quite poor, so it isn't a very positive experience with this eraser. Unlike other editors that have generative artificial intelligence, if we select multiple images, we can also create a collage or a video. And something that I have always appreciated in Huawei is the option to compare images. So if you've taken several photos and want to choose the best one, you can zoom in to see synchronized movements. For instance, here, the top picture shows movement, so I can delete it. It's an easy way to compare images to pick the best one, a feature not seen on other devices. Also in the description, there's a link to a video showing how to get most apps and services working. Google's Assistant. When it comes to artificial intelligence, Huawei doesn't have anything as advanced yet. It has its own features like the voice assistant called Celia, which honestly isn't very impressive. And I'd suggest using it for simple device controls. Turn on the flashlight. Tasks like that could work well. Turn off the flashlight. Set an alarm today for 11:30 a.m. I set an alarm for 11:30 and then set a 30-second timer. Okay, I'm going to start a 30-second timer now. As you notice, for system-related tasks and natural interactions, it behaves quite well. And look, an interesting fact that I hadn't noticed before is that the timer also appears floating in this little capsule, which could be quite attractive. However, if you request some kind of information from this assistant, it won't be so smart. How many days are there until Christmas?
Puedes comprobar los resultados de búsqueda que encontré en línea.
You can look at the search results I found online, and you'll notice that in some searches, it will direct you to the web browser to try to answer your question, which shows it's not very smart. It also has features to scan various things like QR codes and similar items using the camera, even offering a translation option. Watch, for example, how in this situation I can switch to the translation feature, and at the top it shows the detection. I have the ability to click once, and it will display a paused preview with the translation in the language I specified. Actually, I can also click on the copy button to copy the image to the clipboard. This feature can be quite handy as an alternative to Google Lens. Additionally, we will discover AI Touch, which allows us to search for images of what we are currently viewing. Although it is not extremely useful, note for example, if you are viewing an image on social networks, you have the option to press and hold with 2 fingers, but you need to maintain this gesture for quite a while to activate it eventually. Notice in this instance that it informs me it didn't find any QR codes, even though I'm not searching for a QR code, but rather an image. This option, which seemed like an alternative to Google Lens, still needs some refinement as it's quite limited in capabilities. Additionally, it includes a feature called, which is essentially the first page of your home screen where you navigate to and provide a few suggestions for news and shortcuts, but nothing overly advanced. And finally, there's Search, which acts like a global search engine, allowing you to search through applications, various settings, and even files or directly on the web in collaboration with Bing. Additionally, in the gallery, we also have several artificial intelligence functions integrated within the editor. And note that you just need to access the Retouch with AI button. One of my favorite options has been the option for the best expression. Additionally, it informs you that it will conduct an analysis using artificial intelligence within your gallery, focusing on similar photographs you have stored. For instance, if one of the faces hasn't turned out well, you can click to see how it provides alternative options by scanning through other photographs. This way, for example, you can correct a face or choose another one if you prefer those particular poses. Furthermore, if someone happened to close their eyes, for instance, you could easily select a different face from one of the other images available. images, so it's definitely a very useful option. Also keep in mind that this scanning is performed without needing an internet connection. And finally, there are other functions that appear to be much less useful, such as the straighten function. This function will automatically attempt to correct the framing of your photo. However, I honestly don't find it very useful, since there are many times when it indicates that the photo is already straight and no further adjustments are necessary. And then there's another option that supposedly assists us in correcting the photos we take of buildings. However, in my experience, it often tells me that it wasn't possible to accomplish, making these options not very appealing. Finally, there is the option to enhance text using artificial intelligence tools. This is quite similar to the scanner function we previously discussed, but in this case, it's for when you already have a photograph and it will make the necessary adjustments to correct the proportions, making it appear that you captured the picture perfectly straight. These are all the options that, for now, HUAWEI incorporates with artificial intelligence. As you can see, they are basic and sometimes they have limitations, but the most appealing feature was the face editing. In terms of security, it's worth noting that it includes a fingerprint reader embedded in the screen, which is optical. This means it will emit a strong light to identify your fingerprint. In this instance, I must say the recognition hasn't been very quick. Often it doesn't work and I need to keep my finger on it longer than I'd prefer. Luckily, it supports up to 5 entries, offering a good range. Plus, you can change the unlock animation, choosing from 4 different options to find your favorite. It also features facial recognition, however, in this instance, it isn't 3-dimensional. The manufacturer will caution you that it's less secure compared to the recognition found in devices equipped with 3-dimensional recognition. The manufacturer includes intelligent unlocking, allowing it to remain unlocked when linked and connected to a Bluetooth accessory. It would also be beneficial if the intelligent unlocking could detect your location, but unfortunately, that is not the case. Available. We are also going to find a password manager directly integrated in this device, although without cloud synchronization. I would like this manager to be synchronized with your HUAWEI computer and with other devices, but in this case, we will have to go one by one. We will also find the safe for your documents, protected with your fingerprint or with a password that can be different from the password of the main screen, and here you can keep everything safe. Type of private content. Additionally, we will find the application lock feature, which is designed to prevent access to specific applications if you have already lent your phone while it was unlocked. It's important to note that there is also an option to set a screen lock in case you have lent your device and wish to keep it restricted to a particular application. Furthermore, be aware that on the recent application screen, a new button will appear. This button is a pin, and it's crucial to understand that once this is activated, it will not be possible to exit the application. To view another part of the system, unless you swipe up twice, which in that case takes you to the lock screen. This feature can also be useful when you lend your phone to someone else. Additionally, we have the twin app feature that allows you to clone applications and use 2 separate instances of the same app. In the privacy settings, we also have a very good permissions manager showing which applications are most frequently accessing your location, your camera, your microphone, or accessing your files. In this manner, you could more easily identify if there are any apps that might be snooping around inside your stuff without you even realizing it. Additionally, you have the option to remove location metadata when you are sharing your images. Moreover, there is also a private space feature that acts as if you have 2 devices in one. In fact, you can assign a unique fingerprint to each space, and it can also have a different unlock pattern for access. This second space. Notice that in this case, I don't have applications installed in this second space, as each space has its own apps and files. We can leave this private space to return to the main space with our usual footprint. In the security application, note that we will also find a malware scan in collaboration with 360+, a cybersecurity company that perhaps doesn't have as much. It's not a widely used feature, but it's really nice to see this level of security in place as well. And if you happen to lose your cell phone, you do have the option to search for your device using the HUAWEI Cloud. This way you can ring it or even lock it remotely, although you need to log into HUAWEI Cloud and set it up properly for that. After noting this, you can also go to cloudhuawei.com to find your device. However, keep in mind that it cannot be located if it is already turned off, so let's just say it is not excessively advanced, but if there's an option. Finally, we have digital balance features where you can apply parental controls or set limits yourself. You can track and see your time spent on each app, establish usage schedules or limits for specific apps or services, and set periods when the device won't be available. You can secure all of this with a PIN, allowing it to be locked with ease. Moreover, it includes emergency features, enabling you to make an emergency call to a pre-selected contact by simply pressing the on-off button. In fact, you can also send an automatic message, optionally, including your current location. Now let's discuss the battery, which theoretically has a capacity of 5000 mAh. However, during my extreme drain test, we discovered that the battery indeed possesses an exceptionally high capacity. That perhaps the processor isn't quite efficient, since the performance was truly quite low. However, in our background test, the performance was actually very high, making it a somewhat unpredictable device. Regarding the behavior, it will completely depend on your user type. If you are someone who aims to push the processor to its maximum with extremely heavy games, video editing in high resolution, or other very demanding tasks, then the battery might not perform very well. But if you are a user who is a bit more, for those who enjoy quietly browsing social networks or using the camera on a daily basis, this device will offer good battery autonomy. Luckily, it features a standard power saving mode, which can help extend battery life a bit more, even if you're performing heavy tasks. When the battery drops to 2%, it automatically enables an emergency mode designed to prolong battery life even further. However, I do wish there was an option to activate this mode manually, rather than it only activating when the battery hits that 2% mark. This device is capable of supporting a 100 watts charge, which is quite beneficial. If you look at the graph during our test, it came very close to achieving 100 watts. I mention this because there are other devices that, even though they claim to support 100 watts charging, do not surpass 50 watts when we test them. However, in the initial minutes, this device utilizes a significantly high power, allowing it to reach 62% of charge in just 15 minutes. This means it charges extremely fast, as you can observe almost everywhere. Currently, it holds a charge exceeding 15 watts, which means it is always considered a fast charge. In 30 minutes, it reached 99%, and the complete charge took 31 minutes from 0 to 100%. However, it's not recommended to do this. The advice is to start charging when it drops to 15 or 10% at least. This way, your charging sessions will typically last about 20 minutes. The battery's greatest advantage is its charging power, even if the autonomy doesn't always meet the minimum expectations. But there's something that could provide us with more comfort, and it's unfortunately missing, which is wireless charging. In this price range, many competitors are starting to include it. This could be a significant critique. However, to ensure the battery doesn't degrade too quickly, it's fortunate that it features smart charging. It learns your routine and charges more slowly during extended charging sessions. Additionally, it includes the ideal charging lock, which is useful if you need to keep it plugged in continuously to the current in order to prevent the battery from deteriorating. Regarding connectivity, I believe we will mainly find a weak point, which is the lack of support for 5G networks. Although there is an explanation for this, it's not that Huawei doesn't want to, but it's due to the restrictions it faces from the US. So you will encounter G networks. Anyway, I think that nowadays there isn't a significant difference between G and G. However, unfortunately, it lacks support for eSIM, which is a drawback if you frequently travel. Perhaps you might miss this feature. Thankfully, if you have Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2, they provide good stability and speed. Additionally, there's NFC for mobile payments in theory. However, Google Wallet or Google Pay won't work. Even if you attempt to use them, they simply won't function. So, making payments with the cell phone is another limitation of this device, and it could be seen as another weak point. If you're not accustomed to paying with your cell phone, you won't notice this issue, this absence. Additionally, it comes with wireless screen projection in mirror mode, offering options to hide notifications and maintain a certain level of privacy. You can also play videos on a large screen while keeping the cell phone screen off, conserving battery life. However, in this case, we do not find a wired projection option. What we will find is the desktop mode available in a wireless format. So, if you have a monitor or a large screen and you also have a keyboard and a wireless mouse can be used to take full advantage of this interface, enhancing productivity in basic applications. Another limitation of this device is Android Auto. At least from the factory, it doesn't come pre-installed. I'm not saying it's impossible, but installing Android Auto to connect it to a car screen might be somewhat complex. Lastly, regarding the sensors, the news isn't so bad. Fortunately, it includes a gyroscope and a field sensor. Geomagnetic among others, but the proximity sensor is virtual. Like many other manufacturers are betting on this type of sensors that sometimes generate certain inconsistencies when you try to bring the cell phone to your ear. And finally, we are going to find infrared to function as a universal remote control, although curiously it is placed in the area of the cameras. So you have to more or less direct the infrared towards the TV or the device you want to control. However, it does include this particular option. One of the major strengths of this device is the Huawei ecosystem. Keep in mind that there is a wide variety of Huawei devices available, such as the Huawei FreeBuds, Huawei Watch, Huawei Band, Huawei MateBook, and many others. These devices can connect and interact with each other seamlessly, providing immediate linking of accessories. For instance, with the Huawei Watch, you can take pictures, and there is also synchronization of alarms. Additionally, if you own a Huawei computer, you can easily bringing the cell phone closer to send photos. Therefore, the ecosystem experience is quite good. Remember, it integrates technologies like Super Device and Huawei Share, which facilitate all this interaction. So, even though it lacks Google services, the ecosystem isn't as impacted as it might be with other brands, since Huawei offers its own services. In fact, they also have Live, which would assist you in controlling your home devices, although it doesn't support as many devices as some other options might. Well-known brand devices, so in that sense it remains somewhat limited too, but it provides you with an alternative. It offers you Huawei Cloud with 5 GB for free, and if you desire more storage, you can pay for it. It includes its own health app, its own app store, and they even have Huawei Wallet, although it still doesn't function for making payments in many countries. Therefore, Huawei still has several areas to continue developing and expanding, particularly in terms of its services. However, the ecosystem regarding devices and interaction is quite impressive. Now, let's discuss performance as I share its specifications. In this instance, it features the Kirin 800 processor, a recently developed processor by Huawei, crafted using a 7nm process. While it isn't the most advanced in the industry, which might explain its relatively high power consumption, it is fortunately supported by 12 GB of RAM, along with the option for virtual RAM. A large internal storage capacity. In this case, it took about 3/6 to open each of the applications, indicating that it is indeed somewhat slow for tasks that demand a lot of power. It becomes evident here that the processor isn't very modern. Although it is among the latest produced by Huawei, due to US restrictions, it lacks access to the latest generation of Chilean manufacturing. This limitation is noticeable when opening applications for the first time. However, fortunately, they included 12 GB of RAM, which greatly compensates for the lack of processor power. It is noticeable that once the applications are open, we won't really experience delays when switching between applications. Even applications that require some graphics processing perform relatively well and don't seem to have too many issues in this regard. Additionally, when we are browsing through the applications, we will notice that while it might not be a completely fluid experience at 100%, it doesn't entirely freeze up. However, you can perceive that sometimes it takes a bit of effort to load more content. Therefore, the experience might not come across as entirely fluid. In fact, I observed that in this instance it did freeze for a few moments, especially when multiple things are open. So, fluidity will definitely not be one of the main. This device has no standout features, but it's suitable for many users. One of its strengths is its 512 GB storage, allowing you to store plenty of images, photos, and apps or games. Additionally, you can purchase cloud storage separately if you want to back up everything, as there's no microSD support. You could, for example, buy a saucer. The 2 TB do not appear to be excessively expensive, and you could use it to store everything you want. However, let's examine how the storage performs overall. As you can see, it has a read speed that is somewhat lower than what we would ideally prefer. It lacks very high peaks, with only a few specific instances where it surpasses 1000 megabits per second. Regarding write speed, I believe it is quite satisfactory, actually outperforming many other devices. So, right now, let's proceed with a practical exercise. For this case, we will use the Huawei Petal Clips video editor. It is essentially a project similar to what we typically work on with other devices, with a total duration of 1 minute. Let's set it to export in 4K resolution, and now we will wait to see how long the process takes. Once it's done, it took approximately 46 seconds, which indicates that power definitely won't be among its strongest features. As for the gaming experience, it's important to note that there isn't any software addition providing us with more tools. However, keep in mind that in the battery section, there's a maximum performance mode available. This mode can help us avoid any limitations. In this scenario, even when you open a game, you'll notice there isn't an options panel with extra features. Just remember, the option to open applications in a floating window is available, but beyond that, there isn't anything else offered for testing purposes. First, we begin with PUBG. Notice that by default, it provides us with HD quality at a high frame rate. We can only increase to HDR graphics at an ultra rate, and if we reduce the graphic quality to the most basic level, it offers us the extreme frame rate available. However, we are going to prioritize the graphic quality. As you notice, with this quality setting, we had an almost perfect performance, showing very good stability and high frames per second, along with good graphics, even with a good temperature control system. Therefore, despite all its limitations, Huawei appears to have developed a solid Kirin gaming processor that is suitable for its range. Next, we play Arena Breakout. By default, it provides a balanced quality set to a medium rate. In this situation, notice that if you choose to prioritize the graphics, the frame rate will be reduced. Conversely, if you decide to prioritize the frame rate, the graphic quality will decrease. Therefore, in this scenario, we will prioritize enhancing the graphic quality. And with this particular configuration, you can observe that it reaches about 25 frames per second on average. This means it cannot display things very fluidly if you prioritize the graphic detail. Although fortunately, it looks quite good in terms of visual effects, this content clearly shows us that it is not yet a high-end processor. However, the temperature was controlled perfectly, which is fortunate. So, the limitations it has with respect to the graphic quality in conjunction with the frame rate are evident. It could possibly be an issue related to optimizing the game with the processor. We then proceeded to play Legends, altering the automatic setting to a high setting at 60 frames per second to evaluate its capabilities. Once again, we observed a very fluid experience. In fact, during this instance, the game increased to 90 frames per second at one point, and curiously dropped to 45 frames per second, and later went back up to 60. However, it consistently demonstrated good stability during those fluctuations. You just have to remember that this game is constantly adapting its rate of frames per second, possibly to have a better performance, but in general, if it is a device that gives us good fluidity, and again the temperature was controlled quite well below 40 degrees Celsius, and finally in Henshin Impact by default it gives the graphics quality very low. But for our test, we bumped it up to the medium level at 60 frames per second to see what it was capable of and in. In this case, even though the device doesn't maintain a full 100% stability, it appears that we are still likely to experience good gameplay. The lowest point was 38, so it consistently remains above that number, which already provides a good gaming experience. Of course, the more demanding games will require something more powerful, and in this price range, you can definitely find that. However, if a gaming experience is not your top priority, I believe you can still have a good feeling overall. Just keep in mind that the App Gallery game catalog is rather limited, so you'll need to install games from other stores. It's possible that some content might not be fully 100% compatible yet, so it's best to ensure your favorite game can run to avoid disappointment. As you can see, in this instance, it couldn't consistently reach 60 frames per second on average, which is why I say it's not the most advanced option for gaming, although it's clear it wasn't a total disaster either. In conclusion, it seems to me that this device is highly focused on photography. Unfortunately, we will still encounter some inconsistencies in color that will hopefully be optimized with future updates. At the hardware level, it's quite appealing due to the variable aperture and RGB sensors. However, in practice, the results might still not meet the level we would like to see. These pictures aren't bad at all, but given the quality of the hardware, I was hoping for something even better. This might be due to the processor's limitations, since the processor is responsible for translating all the data captured by the hardware into the final photograph. Therefore, I believe that in this situation, the processor will significantly affect the experience, making it not meet the expectations for this price range. The screen quality is excellent and the sound is acceptable. The front camera, especially for zoom, is a unique feature not found in other phones, as is the charging power. However, it might lack in some other areas. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know and see you next time.